Okay, this might be all over the place because if you could not tell, I took an edible and I'm also sweaty from walking uphill to go see the llamas near my house, and my glasses are foggy and I need a shower. But on my walk, I was thinking about the cute little philosophical query of like, does punishment work, and do people deserve punishment? And I kind of started asking myself, like, do people ever deserve bad things to happen to them? And I think, like, immediately upon hearing the question, my gut answer is no, because I like to, when considering like human behavior, kind of take everyone down to like child level. Like, what does a child deserve? And what really differentiates children and adults? And I think in a lot of cases, we have this generalized, people start taking responsibility for their own actions in terms of like, can they go to jail and stuff, at a certain age, and that age just runs across the board, and it's different for different places. It's like a societally decided age where people are now adults, and suddenly they do deserve punishment in a different way than kids do, if kids do at all. And I think that's interesting in a lot of ways, because there are children who grow up in stable and healthy environments where they have the ability to, and the time and the conditions to learn about behavior and positivity in a way that doesn't damage them, in a way that's actually helping them grow, helping them learn how to be a better person, and instilling that as a value too, as something that they should want. And there are also children who grow up in extremely damaging, unhealthy environments, who are taught essentially the opposite, that, you know, regardless of their behavior, they deserve bad things, especially when bad things are continuously happening to these children, and our brain is fine-tuned to focus on bad things that happen because it's very important to avoid those bad things in the future. So coming up with the cause and effect is extremely like a priority for the brain, especially as a kid. And so when you are trying to figure out the why of why bad things are happening, especially in a society that has things like religion and God, when things are so soaked in why, and there being a why in the first place, you know, you start to think that you deserve it. Maybe you don't deserve it all the time, but you at least deserve it sometimes. And we'll get back to how I think that's a slippery slope, but the main point is that some kids grow up in a way where by the time they're 18, they have been given the tools that they need in order to make decisions that don't consistently hurt others. And some kids have not been given those tools. And, you know, it's like the same as financial situations where people who are robbing the store, you know, are not the people who, well, I guess rich people rob stores too. They don't call it robbing when they do it. They call it stealing, and they don't get in trouble. Or maybe they just always call it stealing. Is robbing only for banks? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that, like, we see it in some clear ways where, like, some people who are mentally ill, or like, you can plead that you're insane in court, and some people have learning disabilities that, you know, cause them to exist a little bit outside of those generalized norms. But I think that part's interesting. And then to get back to the slippery slope thing, because like if we're talking about fairness, and punishment is usually about fairness, that's not fair, because having also equal punishment for wrongdoing is not fairness, because fairness would have been receiving the proper parenting and mentorship to be a functional, healthy, cooperative, and fulfilled member of society. That's what fairness would have been. And if you think that a baby doesn't deserve to be hit or to be verbally abused, or to have anything bad happen to them, I guess my question for you is, does a 7-year-old deserve bad things to happen to them? Or is it the parents' fault? If a 7-year-old is skipping school, it's the parents' fault. If an 18-year-old is skipping school, it gets more complicated. And if a 23-year-old is homeless, you know, it's... But at what age do you think? And do you think it's the 18th birthday of every single person in this country? I mean, I just think that even thinking about that reveals like how complex the issue is. And so anyway, I think that it's a slippery slope with punishment, because yeah, kids and even adults learning that sometimes they do deserve bad things, whether those bad things are a kind of extrinsic or environmental consequence that happens naturally, like you ride your bike without a helmet, you hit your head and get a concussion, and then you never do that again. Did you deserve that? And also, you know, someone else punishing you for your actions, or even like, I guess like interpersonal conflict and stuff, or people trying to settle the score, sometimes passive aggression, all that stuff. And then the question I think becomes, is it solution oriented or judgment oriented? And I really just don't think it's solution oriented, because again, when people start thinking that sometimes they deserve punishment or consequences, sometimes they deserve bad things, immediately you're opening the door for that sad, frustrating thing that humans do, where it begins to seep into our mindset on a greater scale. You know, when you allow yourself to sometimes look in the mirror and think I'm ugly, you start doing that more and more when you hear negative feedback from other people, criticism, that often sticks in your brain more than positive feedback. You know, you start to think that when people compliment you, they're lying. When people insult you, they're telling the truth. And I think that when people believe that sometimes they deserve bad things, it is very easy to start convincing yourself that most of the bad things that happen to you are deserved. Because we are extremely insecure beings in a lot of ways. And again, we're in this society steeped in why, and people always saying things like everything happens for a reason, and you know, coming up with little ways to even just comfort themselves, like stress builds character. I used to have a friend who would always say that, and I was like, but that doesn't mean that you deserve stress. And hey, guess what else builds character? Everything. Anyway, I was doing some research and I saw like, oh, corporal punishment is pretty much universally psychologically understood as negative for kids. And I just think that it's this conversation that it needs to get more airtime in people's lives about like, hey, why do you think that physical abuse is this terrible, terrible thing and verbal abuse is less terrible, or emotional abuse?